I don't pick any particular niche, right? So it's not like I don't say, okay, fishing is a good niche or hunting is a good niche. That's basically not how I approach things. And because any niche, especially if you're going in such a high level, of course, that it is just too high level. You always need to look at sub niches, right? And then each one individually can be either interesting or not. The way I usually do my research, if I have the time to do it, of course, because it is a bit of work, is that I would use a keyword research tool, and it doesn't really matter which one you take, as long as the relative search volume amounts are in line. Try to figure out which of the niches that are getting a decent or a very good amount of search volume. But that doesn't mean, well, go with the one that has the most, because then you'll end up in fishing. Right? And if you just go for fishing in general, then you're going to have a tough time to sell something out nowadays. But if you look at the sub niche for fishing, let's say I'm just going to pick something now, right? Let's be it bass or catfish or whatever, it doesn't matter, or a certain subtype, then look at that search volume and then always try to put it into a relation with the competition. Now, the question, of course, that people have is, how do I figure out where the competition is? Well, there are indicators, of course. You can look how many listings are there, what is the quality of the listings that are already on the platform. And then I try to sort of just create a ratio, right? You can do a 2x2 matrix and you just go market potential, which is in terms of search volume. And then you've got competition, and then you can plot it. And then based on that, you can easily sort of categorize niches into really attractive, somewhat attractive, also somewhat attractive but different, or just, don't touch it because it's a waste of time. So that's like the broad sort of initial approach that I do, and that doesn't take very long. Once I do pick one,
before we move on to the next step, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
A couple of things that I think would help people out is, you said you have a look at the search volume, right? Which tools do you recommend, or which tools do you use to actually figure out the search volume for these specific niches?
So I used to use Keyword Tool.io, but that is a fairly expensive tool. And nowadays, I would not necessarily say that you need to do that. Other people would use stuff like Merch Informer or Merch Ninja. It doesn't really matter, right? As long as they provide some form of keyword search volume, then that's useful. If it's a platform that can give you Merch by Amazon, just Amazon search volume, and Keyword Tool.io, for example, does that, then that's obviously even better if you're selling on Amazon. But also because Amazon is always a good reference point, right? Because it's heavily consumer focused. Google is trickier because it mixes together with lots of other types of search. And I can't remember what the statistic was, but there was a statistic about the US that 92% of all initial purchasing search queries are started on Amazon and not on Google. And this may have changed now in the past few years with Google Shopping, but it says a lot about the very different type of search intent that goes into Amazon than goes into Google. That being said, you can easily just use something like Keywords Everywhere as well, which I personally find really good because it literally shows you keywords everywhere, and it's also very, very cheap by comparison. And again, it's not about the absolute numbers, right? It's about the ratios.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And the second part of that was the competition. So can we say that's just the search results on Amazon, or will you look on different platforms? Because I sometimes check Redbubble, TeePublic as well to get a feel of different platforms, not just one.
Yeah. So competition is more difficult, of course, because as you say, it's different on every platform. The reason why I usually recommend Amazon anyway, is because Amazon just gives you so much data, right? There's just so much, it's just abundant, and including bestseller rankings and everything. And of course, Redbubble is not the same type of platform, but it's reasonable to expect that it will be similar. Now, the competition on Amazon will probably be higher, I would say, simply because it's such an attractive market. But there's just so many different factors that go into it. You can also look at how many designs have like ratings, reviews, and are reviews and ratings relevant on that platform? So it's not just do they have it, but is it also relevant for how customers make decisions on that platform? And that's different everywhere. For Spreadshirt, for example, reviews don't really make a difference. They have these reviews, but they're just for the products in general, not for the designs. So it depends on a number of factors, right?
Yeah, on Amazon, if you see a lot of shirts in that niche with a lot of reviews, then that is a lot of competition, essentially.
Yeah. But it also depends on the quality, right? So if a listing, just because there's a lot of listings, doesn't mean that they're all relevant competition. So if you have a very badly optimized listing, or not you, or if the competition just doesn't have very well optimized listings, then it doesn't matter that there's 100,000 listings. They're never going to show up anyway. You can easily slip up in the rankings just because you optimize for a particular keyword, and it may be a different keyword from what the majority are optimizing on. So like one of the things that I particularly recommended people at the beginning when they start out is, especially since you're not too experienced and you don't have the weight of experience to really push yourself into a very, very competitive niche, is pick something with a quote and then check. Let's say we'll stick with fishing, right? But so instead of checking whether people are searching for fishing t-shirt, just look at your quote and just check, are people searching for the quote? If people are specifically searching for the quote, then it will show up in the autocomplete. And if you then optimize just for that quote, then yes, you will get less people, or sorry, not less people, but you won't tap into the big market, but you will tap into the smaller market, and you will do it in a much better way than the guy who is optimizing for the larger niche. And that's how you get your sales, especially at the beginning.
And you can move up, and this is the benefit. Once you get some sales there in the small market, yes, you can move up to the broad one.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it's
cool. You had an oil rig example, I think, or analogy that I heard in a past podcast, which was quite cool for this. So do you want to recite that?
So the reason I used the oil analogy was because my before my sort of self-employment life, I worked for a large multinational oil company, and I like to use the analogy because it's very, very fitting. So the way oil exploration works is that you drill a lot of holes, and you don't really know for sure how much is in the ground. You can kind of guess, because there's tools to help you estimate the seismographics and everything, and geology, but you won't really know until you drill. And once you start drilling that hole, sometimes you'll see a little bit of oil seep through. That's a good sign. But sometimes you'll also strike nothing, and then it's just, okay, move on. And then sometimes you'll hit absolute gold, and then it'll just shoot up. And then once it does, that's when I say, okay, you found one hole here, but all my other holes were all over the place somewhere else, because I was kind of trying to just cover as much space as possible. But once I find oil here, well, then I start checking around that hole, that well, and then those are basically the sub niches that you then sort of dive into within the larger, broader niche. And each one of those wells will be different. Some will be more attractive, some less. But that's proven to be very, very effective for me.
Yeah, I can attest to that as well. It's sort of, sometimes you find a working concept or a working sub niche, and then you try similar stuff, for similar niches, or you apply the concept to other niches and it just works. And you have to do a lot of groundwork, covering all that space to be able to say, I need to go deeper here. You just can't do it from the start. And you've actually got a service as well, or sort of a report on niches, right? Where you do niche research for people, which I thought was really interesting, and some people listening might be interested. So how does that exactly work? And where can people find it as well?
Yeah, so the it's called the Heidorn report because my last name is Heidorn. We're gonna have to spell that out for people because it's.
I'll put it in the description.
Yeah. But the reason it's called that way is because one of my customers at some point, they just started calling it that. And then I just embraced it and said, okay, we're just going to rename it that way. It's just awesome branding. Okay. And so I started this 2019. And it was just sort of an experiment that we did at the time, checking with a lot of people whether it's something that they were interested in. And it's a bi-weekly merch strategy and research report where basically you get 2 to 3 reports each month, and every time it's a new sort of broad niche with 3 sub niches that I then really break down in tons of detail. So like really quantitative, like with statistics, charts, numbers, keyword research, also with ideas for designs, though of course you're not supposed to necessarily copy them, but sure, if you want to, you can. And just a whole bunch of inspiration and guidance. And it's mainly targeted at people who maybe they know how to do this, but they just don't have the time, right? Because they've got a full-time job, they've got family, and they just want to focus on designing. And so this is meant to help those people. And the strategy part, which is basically every month or so that you get one of the older reports that I've basically, just because you're sort of starting late, it doesn't mean that you don't get the old ones, you just get them slower. They cover a lot of the foundational basics and skills, but also advanced tactics that I've used over the years. And they can be applied to pretty much anything in e-commerce or online marketing, but it is specifically in this case in the context of merch by Amazon and print on demand in general. And so that's still going. And just to give you an idea, it's been around for a while. We're at number 85 or now for research reports. And there's roughly 18 strategy reports.
If you enjoyed that clip, then click here to watch the full episode of Print on Demand Wisdom.